And number 5 is Steve Ditko. Yes, that's right, Steve Ditko. One of the biggest comic book people ever. Steve Ditko is famous for working on Spider-Man comics during the 60s. And of course, he's pretty much well known for being the guy who created the look of Spider-Man. Without a doubt, that's what makes him so famous, is that he's kind of the father of Spider-Man, but he also went on to DC to do to begin art runs on many different characters, such as Batman and Superman, and even created a few characters of his own. And many of the characters he created at DC would go on to become many of the most famous characters of all. Well, such as The Question, the Ted Kord version of the Blue Beetle, the Creeper, Captain Atom, and Hawk and Dove. He would go on to create many different characters, and his overall comic book participation rivals that of Jack Kirby, who I've been building up to a whole lot. So yeah, I don't have much to say about Steve Ditko, but he definitely deserves to be on this list because he was an incredibly influential artist. And there you go. And number 4 is one of my absolute favorites, George Perez. What can I say about this man right here? George Perez, people. Now, some of you may think, oh, why George Perez? Why? Because it's George freaking Perez. That's why. This guy has done so many different artwork. It's insane. This guy, he has done so much like team-related comic books. Like he's done like work for the Avengers. He's done work for the Justice League, the Teen Titans. He did a little bit for the X-Men. This guy, his artwork, artists like George Perez, they remind you why you are a comic book fan. Because Perez's artwork, it's so colorful, it's so lively, it's so four-dimensional. It's so charming too. But I think it's mostly because that this guy is able to draw so many characters on one page with so little effort, and yet have every single one of them be filled with so much detail. Okay. Oh, he also drew Wonder Woman as well. This guy's done so much. I mean, it's not even funny. George Perez is often considered to be one of the all-time great comic book artists. And I not only agree, but I mutually agree. I believe that this guy is one of the all-time great comic book people ever. Next up is, yes, Jim Lee. Yes, I admit it. I will admit it. I am a sucker for Jim Lee. But honestly, how can you blame me? His artwork is so gorgeous to look at. I swear to God, every time I open up one of his X-Men or his Batman or Wildcats books or whatever, before what I hold in my hands is just pure eye candy. That's all I can use that's the only word I can use to describe his work. It's just genuine eye candy. The way he draws everything is just absolutely perfect. I mean, from the shading to the muscles to the proportions to the angles that he draws everything at, it's incredible. This guy, he is undoubtedly one of the greatest artists working today. And I mean, I could look at every single one of his pictures. I do kind of wish he would do some more Marvel stuff, but I think it's cool that he's working in DC because there's like, I think it's cool to see him draw Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and Green Lantern and all these great DC characters. When, you know, when he started out in the 90s in Marvel, he was drawing stuff like X-Men. Of course, his X-Men stuff sold like fucking hotcakes. It sold enormously. Throughout the 90s, he almost did nothing but X-Men stuff, you know? So it's like, so honestly, I don't blame him for doing mostly DC stuff, because I would want to change up stuff in my career. But I respect every decision he's made so far and every decision he will make, because Jim Lee is awesome. And number 2 is, unfortunately, is the late Michael Turner. Yes, Michael Turner was without a doubt one of the most talented and skilled artists of his time. Let me tell you something. This guy, the way he drew characters, he drew them in a phenomenal way. The women he drew were gorgeous and sexy, and the men he drew were huge, bulky, and badass and intimidating looking. He did not draw a single character in a bad way. He had a very distinct and unique style to him, and that's what made him such a great artist. He was able to make every character look good. You know, I mean, he's drawn so many different characters I can't even name. And of course, he's drawn his own independent comics as well. And boy, let me tell you, when I say that he draws women sexy, he draws them really, really sexy. But I mean, in the recent years, up until his death, he started doing a lot more. DC stuff, and he broke off from being an independent artist and writer, and he started doing more Marvel and DC stuff up until his unfortunate passing in 2008. I can't remember what he died from. I think it was some kind of cancer or something. But it really sucks that he's dead now, because he was really one of the most talented artists of this time period. And I think we've lost a great man. And it sucks we won't be able to see him do more. And of course, yes, you guessed it, number 1 is the king himself, Jack Kirby. Jack freaking Kirby. What can I say about this man? Jack Kirby, in my opinion, is the Jesus Christ of comic books. He came, he gave us great things that will be remembered by all the comic book fans out there, and then he died, leaving behind an enormous legacy that has inspired thousands of young comic book talents. Jack Kirby has done for comic books what Steven Spielberg has done for films. He has inspired countless other people, whether they be artists or writers. This man's imagination has sparked thousands of other imaginations to follow in his footsteps. His parents were immigrants from Europe, and he grew up in a very crappy, low-profile part of New York, where his family was very poor, and it was a very rough neighborhood where he had to fight to survive. The only real talents he had were drawing, and thus Jack Kirby was assigned to draw for Timely Comics during World War II, and during this period, he, along with Joe Simon, created Captain America. Yup, Big Blue himself. And then, later on in the 60s, Jack Kirby collaborated with Stan Lee and a few other artists to create the Holy Marvel Pantheon. And after doing a whole lot more Marvel work, he went on to DC, where he would do nothing but DC stuff for the next few years. And then he gave us the epic New Gods series, and introduced us to a whole new, brilliant and interesting aspect of the DC Universe. Jack Kirby was a genius, an unadulterated genius who worked tirelessly countless unbelievable hours of the day to draw and bring us his fantastic stories, his fantastic artwork. His artwork is so vivid and imaginative and real that every time I read a Jack Kirby book, I get chills sent down my spine. This man almost basically worked himself to death, and he was terrified to walk into any store to see characters advertised on merchandising when he knew that he was never given any credit for these characters. Mr. Kirby, if you're listening, all I want to say is thank you. Thank you for the wonderful things you've given us. And that's all for me.